Hello and welcome to another episode of Jack Amplified. This is a podcast where we amplify the voices of young people and experts around mental health, usually around the early intervention, prevention of mental health, since that's what we're focused on at Jack.org, but all sorts of different areas. Today we're going to talk about bullying, and we have brought on an expert and advocate. I'll let her introduce herself, but before I get to that, just want to remind everyone to follow, subscribe, and like the podcast. Part of why we do this is just to grow the community, spread the message, reduce the stigma. We can only do that with your help. So please, again, follow, subscribe, and like. So welcome to this week's episode. You know, we sometimes think, should we read this large bio about our guests or should we try and introduce them? And I think, who best to introduce themselves than the actual guests themselves? So I want to introduce Rachel Weinstock. She is an anti-bullying advocate and speaker. Rachel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a mental health coach for preteens and teens, and I specialize in also anti-bullying work, and I'm an anti-bullying advocate and speaker. I'm the author of my book back there, Be Who You Needed, which is about my own journey being bullied from grade 1 until the end of high school, and how I grew up to become the person I am for doing this work for other people. Yeah, so those are the things that I do, and I'm also an educator as well. So I work in the school system, and just supporting kids with their mental health and anti-bullying work.
So generally doing a lot of good. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on the podcast today. Rachel, from the perspective of an anti-bullying advocate, how bullying impacts mental health? How does bullying impact mental health, and what can be done to address it?
So it impacts like every aspect of mental health. People that have gone through bullying, it really falls under complex trauma oftentimes, and depending on the severity of what's happening. So it can impact people in terms of their anxiety, panic attacks, social anxiety, challenges with relationships in terms of attachment. Unfortunately, suicidal ideation and, lots of different things, self-harm. But it also impacts physical well-being because there's such a high stress level in terms of autoimmune things. Like it just, the reaches are so far spread. And then
Absolutely.
your
And
second part of your question was, what can we do about it? Is that right?
yeah, what can be done to address it?
Well, there's so many different things, but one of them is really having more training for educators and administrators in the school systems to be able to know how to support and handle when bullying comes up. And systems that are in schools, like to kind of have a protocol that is across the board of like, this is how we handled it, this is what we do. Then in terms of at home, for parents to really take it seriously, and also educators and admin. So if a child comes forth and says, I'm being bullied, to really get curious and ask more questions and take that seriously, so that we really believe them. And then equipping children in terms of if they are a victim of bullying, like what can they do to advocate? Who can they turn to get help? And then also creating safe environments in terms of classroom, or camp or other places of how to create more inclusion. That's a really key part, and social emotional learning as a foundation.
And specifically when we talk about, because Jack.org is a young person focus, how does it specifically affect the mental health of young people, both immediately and over time?
Yeah, so it impacts them in terms of just like wanting to be here on this planet. Like that's one of them. Having challenges in terms of socially, like, if someone's gone through bullying, that also that creates a lot of attachment challenges. So oftentimes, so them not feeling like they can be part of something or they're included, or trying to control and really like maybe sometimes bully other kids because they've gone through that. This is my cat Ani coming to say hi as we're chatting. She's curious.
Well,
Um, Yeah, so just lots of things around how we show up in relationships, how we show up in friendships, how we show up in relationships, how we feel about ourselves, our confidence, the impact in day to day of anxiety, panic attacks, all of that. It's so far reaching.
I'll tell you a little story. This is unscripted, a little story that so I grew up in the Niagara region, and my best friend was just terrorized and bullied, and he was a fairly tall guy but skinny. And so
Mhm.
from the grade from the from grade six probably through for about 2 3 years, just like crazy bullying. I would stand up for him. I took I got beat up a little bit, but I it was just a little different. Right? I would stand up. I would take that.
Mhm.
I just saw how it terrorized him. His dad had to come into the school, ask them to do something about it. Nothing was done about it. And what kind of what happened for him, interestingly enough, is that he started going into physical fitness weights. He was his mental state was, I'm just going to build myself bigger, bigger, and bigger. No one's ever going to hurt me again.
Mhm.
And got to the point where he was huge and
Mhm.
he could protect himself. And he kind of almost went the other way. He became a bouncer. He was getting in
Mhm.
physical altercations that hurt him, and uh, had brushes with the criminal justice system. And I linked that all back to what happened to him because
Yeah.
I had a front row seat.
Yeah.
And eventually, this like it was so like this you can't script this. We were out one night in our 20s, and the guy who terrorized him when he was, about 13 years old was sitting in a booth. Um, Most likely experiencing homelessness, was down and out, sat down, and he sat down across from him, and, and I thought he was gonna hurt this guy. Just
Mhm.
the anger and the pain that this it brought everything back. I thought this is not gonna end well, and just years later, how it terrorized him, how it shaped his future, how it almost took control. Now, the good news story is that, through some counseling and other pieces, he was able to kind of work through that, but, man, I saw what 3 years of bullying did, and it's changed, though, for youth, where that was kind of that face to face. Now we see, social pressures, especially online, where you can be a faceless coward, as I call them. How has that changed the way that youth experiencing bullying now?
Yeah, well, I'm just sitting with the story that you just shared. So, first of all, thank you for being an ally and support and lifeline for your friend. I mean, that is oftentimes the difference between someone like being able to stay and be here. And I'm curious, when they talked in the booth, like, were they able to have a conversation and repair? Like, was that person able to take any accountability?
So the interesting part, because this guy bullied me a bit too, but like I said, I would take it. I remember he hit me once, and I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of crying in front of him. That was my big prideful moment. I went around the corner and did that, but
Mhm.
I was boring, right? Because I didn't give him the response he wanted. Where my friend was terrified and would do whatever he said, to the embarrassment of like, where you're like, oh man. And so when they sat down in the booth, and I was there with them, and my friend at the time was probably about 260 pounds, just a big, and this guy recognized him, but had no recollection. It was like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? Whatever." And he said, "Do you remember me?" And he was looking at asking, "Do you?" He said, "Oh, yeah, and told him his name, whatever." But I think the good part about it was that he recognized this guy was in no place to have a conversation,
Yeah.
and that what it shaped him to be that bully, to be that,
Yeah.
and what it had he gone through in his life that now led him to look like he was experiencing homelessness. He was down and out. And thankfully, my friend was able to take a breath and think this isn't worth it. Like this is not the end result. This isn't going to make it better to hurt him. That's not going to bring me any closure,
Mhm.
and also almost feel sorry for him and what had happened to him. So yeah, it was so interesting to watch, and I thought but I was very scared for a moment because I had seen what he had done to my friend. It was just awful, and how he had shaped his life.
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest influences in his life was this
Yeah.
bully.
Yeah. Yeah. I will come back to your question, but I just want to share one other thing. So, I was bullied from grade 1 until the end of high school. So I say I had a couple years off. But the trauma, like when you go through that, you're internalizing, all those messages, and they become your kind of like record inside, like your belief system, unfortunately. I always felt like it was kind of like, the idea it's kind of it's a violent thing to do to somebody, but I always felt like it was like shrapnel that kind of exploded coded internally in my mind of like, this is who I became, this unworthy person of, being on this planet by these different groups of people. So later on, when I actually changed schools, but want the two people that were doing kind of the main part of this, and then a larger group of boys. One of them, I always felt intuitively like he doesn't really want to do this. Like he's better than this. Why is he doing this? And years later, we became friends and we had a conversation in COVID time online because I am always posting about anti bullying work and advocacy. And he said, I wonder if you're open to a conversation. So we had a couple hours on Zoom of just him telling me, I'm so sorry, and telling me before I moved to his school in grade 8, they had actually done the same thing to him and actually put him in the hospital. It was so severe physically and emotionally what was happening. So he said to himself, I'll never put myself in that situation again, and I'll always have to be on top. So whatever they're doing, I'm going to join them. So then he targeted me, and I could always feel that there was like a difference between his energy. So, I have a very open heart. It has, I immediately said, like, of course, like, I understand from an adult perspective. And he told me about all the different boys and what they were going through at home. Like, some of them were being, physically harmed by their parents. There were so many different things. And my main bully actually, and I knew this as well, but it didn't help the abuse that I was going through because bullying is abuse. Um, his mother was critically ill for years, and she was, basically a prolonged kind of dying situation. So he was in agony and targeted me. And I was his way to get out those feelings. I understood that all as a child, and still it was really difficult to, I mean, it was horrific. It's abuse. So it's just interesting now that I get to do this work. And this is another reason why I've been able to do so much resolution in schools, because I never look at the person bullying and think that is a bad person. It is a choice and it comes from somewhere, and we need to get actively curious where it's coming from and how can that person get met in a way that really reaches their heart so that they can really see what they're doing and take accountability, and not like judge them or shame them, but actually get them to align with their humanity so that they can actually see what they're doing to the other person. So going back to what you were saying about the online stuff and this cowardly, approach, I often think that, if we look at when we actually see like the actual impact. So if someone's crying and someone's, bullying them, but if we see all the other things, all the impacts on the mental health and all that, the same thing is true online is it's like it's more distance space so that we can put more of our pain onto somebody and not see the consequence of what that is. So it's, in a way, it's the same actions, it's just more amplified because it's online. But the impacts are like in a way it's the same, in a way it's different because once you're bullied, it's like that's in your brain of like how you're thinking, your patterns. Yeah, it's just amplified online, unfortunately.
And I think too of like I have three adult girls,
Mhm.
and they, the youngest who grew up in that time went, and I remember just didn't matter the number of positive comments, but one like mean comment would just
Yeah,
send my youngest spiraling, right? And I thought,
yeah.
wow, why would anyone? And I think also too, as another add to when you are bullied as a young person, I don't know if this is how you're often triggered a little more as an adult when you see that flash of, because you're going back, you're triggered, and my friend who I told you about, he told me that with his kids, and then his wife said that, I had to be, we were really care like if he felt one of our kids was bullied, he saw red and he was so upset.
Mhm.
If he and how it can trigger us as adults, it doesn't really leave, right?
No, it doesn't, and, like, I still have, complex PTSD reactions sometimes when I see a school bus, and I'm an adult driving, and I still have those feelings that I can feel in my nervous system, and I always say that the work that I get to do is the closest thing that I have to time travel, because when I get to change that trajectory of a child's life and their family's life, right? So it's also I'm not just working with the child when I do coaching, I work with the, family because teaching them how to advocate. So I have a bullying advocacy kit that walks people through step by step on what to do and kind of give them like kind of essentially holding their hands, metaphorically and the child's hand to go through and be like, these are the different steps. Because the biggest thing that happens with bullying, and it happened with me, it happens with anybody that, I've spoken to, is it happens both with adults and children, where they go to somebody, the child will go to somebody and say, like, this person's bullying me, and then someone's like, we're working on it. And I always say, when someone's working on it, it's not working, because it has to be something that we approach and deal with right away. Like, immediately, we're like, let's talk about this. Let's create a circle where we can, have the person that is, doing these things to you and harm and repair and have resolution and accountability. So you often feel like when you take the step and you tell somebody that it's going to be dealt with and now, like, it's out of your hands. But I always want to know, well, is it still continuing or is it not? And if it's still continuing, we have an issue. So parents often feel like they go to the school and they say, okay, my child's being bullied. And the school's like, okay, we'll work on it. And then a year has passed, 2 years, now they're in grade like 10. So it's like, it has to be that there's a plan, like, immediately, of what's going to happen. And then, is that plan working? And then if not, what can we do? You know?
Yeah, yeah, and let's talk. You start talking the kid. What about other strategies? If I'm a parent listening, or if I'm a youth wanting to help my friend, what are strategies that we could take to address bullying?
Yeah. So, first of all, I always say, believe the young person. Like, if anybody comes to you and says, like, this is happening, like, to you as a parent, even if you think it's insignificant, like, oh, someone stole their Pokemon cards for like a week, that still matters, because if someone stole your phone for a week over and over and over again, or your car, like, it's not, we have to see it through, not like, oh, it's childlike or childish. We have to see it as, like, actually that is harm happening to the child. So believe them first as a parent. And then get curious. Like, get curious, well, when did this happen? What's happening? Don't go into trying to, like, solve or fix, because of course, if you've experienced bullying, you're gonna be like, Mama bear, Papa bear, like, I'm going in, I'm gonna, like, and I've had parents, like, actually try and say, like, okay, I'm gonna, like, interject and, like, find this person on the way home. That's not the way to handle it. So you have to kind of, like, really bite your tongue and get curious and get more information about what's happening. And then, so with the kit, it walks people through. So there's templated letters, and it's based on, like, real cases of clients that I worked with that we've advocated effectively. So anybody that's used this kit, as far as I know, and now it's kind of like more far reaching, because it's with the Kids Help Phone as a tool, and, like, lots of different offices with doctors and therapists and different things. But
Incredible.
as far as I know, it's been 100% effective that it's been used. And anybody who's seen the kit always says, I've never seen something like this. So it's very, I'm all about, I'm neurodivergent. So I'm all about, like, what is practical and useful. So there's letters that are based on the child to the teacher. So as a parent, you sit down, you hear all this information. Let's take a look at the kit, or let's craft a letter, and using, like, actual mental health impacts, right? My child is depressed. Like, having the child say, like, I'm depressed, I'm having panic attacks, I don't want to live anymore, and sharing that written to the school, and then setting up a meeting with the teacher. And then, there's different, the kit goes through the whole thing, but it escalates if it's not working. So reflecting on, is it working? Is this still happening? No, it's not. Now we have to meet with the principal. Okay, that didn't work. And everything is written so that there's a paper trail as well. Because oftentimes kids will go to educators, and even if they're so well-meaning and really present, there's hundreds of kids at recess. So you're trying to really hear this person that's bullied, and maybe that's your student, maybe not. So having a letter and documentation so that that teacher can really hear not just what's happening, but the impact mental health wise on that child, and then escalating it. So always, as Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers, that's based on his mom. That is the biggest thing that my parents didn't do. And that's what I didn't do, because you learn, if you go to someone and nothing's happening, then you just feel helpless and hopeless. So you just kind of turn inwards. And that's exactly what happened to me. So, I was bullied. Nobody should be bullied for any amount of time, but especially their whole years growing up. So it's just too long, and it equals abuse. Like, it really needs to be seen that way, because it's often talked about kind of like, oh, they're bullying, whatever. And people don't see how serious it is unless you've lived it, or someone close to you has gone through that. So yeah, it's, I often think about how my clients will tell me, like, even this person that, I reconciled with and repaired with, he talked about, I won't go into too many details, but just horrific physical things that happened to him that it was done by other children, but if he came to a teacher and said, "This happened to me," and we didn't know who it was, and we thought maybe it's their parents, we'd have to report that to child services. So in school, like, it's kind of like, "Oh, it's another child, it's a peer," but that equals abuse, and we really need to see it as such. So I don't know if I answered your question, 'cause I was
100%.
but
This is all gold. Thank you so much.
yeah.
We're gonna go to a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Angelica with Jack.org. Every day, we hear from young people across the country telling us the same thing. They didn't know how to ask for help with their mental health when they needed it most. Jack Ride is changing that, but only with your support. This May, join Canada's Ride for Youth Mental Health. You can cycle with us on Ride Day or move your own way anytime throughout May. Lock in early bird pricing for just $75 before February 28th. Visit jack.org/ride today and show youth they're not alone.
And we are back. Now, you touched on this a little bit. I think that, if we're going to make progress in anti-bullying, a lot of it will start in schools and communities and in these environments. How do we uh, create environments where young people feel safe to speak up, especially in schools?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Okay, so I love this question so much, and there's lots of things. So one of the things that I think is so important for us to kind of like reimagine is play in schools, like play-based creative learning in schools. So, like we have a kindergarten system, that is play-based, but as soon as kids move to grade one, I'm talking to, past kindergarten students that move to grade one and up, play and creativity is taken out drastically to once a week, and I often talk with, past students of we have Fridays to have play day for an hour, our play thing, and we look forward to that. So play and creativity is the language of children. So that is going to create spaces where children can feel regulated because they have sensory needs being met. They can engage in like, positive like interactions relationally, like play wise, and then, all the different dynamics that come out, then you have space and time to help repair that and restore that. So, one thing is play and creativity. I know that's kind of maybe something that people don't think about, but that is really important. Then educators really focusing on how they can build their own repertoire and hopefully more training around nonviolent communication, um, restorative circle, like restorative justice circles, ways to kind of like de-escalate, right? And then like another thing that I think, and I've seen this at some schools, is they have like a jar that you can put anonymously into, this is happening to me, I'm scared or I'm sad or whatever. So students can like place what's like a place to put information if they're struggling with something. And schools sometimes have that. Like sometimes there's a way that you can report in terms of bullying anonymously, but you can name the person that's doing that in schools. And then just really teachers really caring, really like learning to attune more to the students' needs and more space around how can we create inclusive environments and integrating the kids with that, like asking them, because kids are the most like brilliant humans really on this planet sometimes. And they're so filled with creativity and ideas. They want to be a part of it. So including them in what could we do to make this classroom more kinder and inclusive and magical? What could we do in the world? Like what project could we work towards to do something good? And just really highlighting that, as a foundational part in schools so that as they move to grade 7, grade 8, they're going through puberty, they are really connected to their hearts and they're connected to each other and they trust the adults. They really feel heard by the adults too. It's not the adults versus like an adolescent. It's like we're in this together. And that comes through community building and humor and creativity and a lot of attunement and all that. It's kind of a magical like soup that we put together. But that's really how I build what I do. And I've any space I'm in, either education, speaking, coaching online, all of that, I always integrate and I always have pretty much the same response of the young person feeling seen, heard, trusted, trusting me, and feeling good. That's the goal. It's like that the young person feels good with you so that they can then build trust and then in the community.
Yeah, you mentioned something that, I mean, we love at Jack.org is youth for youth. So nothing for us without us, involve us. We know best what we want, right? So
Yes.
that's important. Now, I have a question for you too. So, with allies, teachers, parents, etc., the term bullying sometimes gets, I think, misused, right? Where everything becomes, the teacher said this, they're bullying me. This person, they're
Mhm.
bullying. So, how do you like? How do we define it a little better? And not that we, again, you don't ever want to.
Mhm.
Um, if someone's saying that it's a very serious thing and you want to take it, you want to take action and do that. But for parents and teachers and people trying to, how would you say what would be bullying and maybe what would be let's have a conversation, and maybe that isn't that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. So when something is like repetitive over and over and over again, so if someone is continually, being told that they're ugly, they're stupid over and over and over again, if it's a one-off comment, then that is just somebody being unkind. But when it is repetitive, that, falls into that abusive, nature of that. That's how I would define it. But I would say also that if we are able to, as adults, stay regulated, meaning calm and curious, and just like as
Love
much
that. Yeah.
like check our, I always say put it on the shelf, check your judgment on the shelf as much as you can, like recognize and be like, oh, part of me is judgmental. This child is like crying about whatever. Try and check that and just get curious. So I remember years ago, like probably a decade ago, I was working in a school and this child came in and I knew that they had so many things happening at home, their home environment, but they were always trying to get care and love, essentially. That's what they were doing, but the form it showed up with was like, "Oh, this hurts," or whatever. So they had a tiny little cut, and they were upset about it, and the secretary's like, "You're fine," and, like, sent them out. And when they got into the classroom, I thought about actually, it's not the cut that they're upset about, it's, like, the fact that they feel unsafe in their home environment, and they just want love and care. So, actually, it's not, like, the little tiny cut that I can't see, it's about the care that goes around believing them, even if it's not there. So, I took the time to be like, "Hey, I'm gonna give you a Band-Aid," and they immediately were able to regulate and calm down. So, even if a child comes to you and says, like, "I'm being bullied, this person said this thing to me today," just get curious and be like, "Oh, okay, how did that feel for you?" Like, turn it back to them so that they have space. Don't try and rush in and fix everything. Give them more autonomy, but just get curious, hold space. And actually, one of the most helpful things I've ever done in all the work I do is role playing because that's when it's muscle memory. So get your child, if they're telling you that they're going through something, to say what happened and ask them, I want to know the tone of voice that this person said this to you. And then you say, is it okay if I do that? I'm going to say this to you. And then we're going to find a way to actually get you, your nervous system back online so that you can respond to that, even if you're just practicing, so role playing is so key too.
Amazing. I love that. Just that be curious piece. If a young person was asking you for advice and say, like, what's one thing I should know about how do I stand up for myself or others? What would it be? One key bit of advice.
How would I stand up for myself and others? Um, well, not everyone has access to doing it safely, like depending on what's happening. So I think finding a way that's safe, right? So if you can't verbally say it because there's going to be consequences and you're scared, then going to an adult and trying to find that adult to be able to help you, support you. And if you go to an adult and they're like, well, that's not an issue, you're fine, which is actually what was told to me. Don't stop there. Like I said, keep going and look for the helper, but really, I would say, like, we need to have a reflective practice of, like, what do I wanna say? I always ask that to my clients too. "Well, this was said to you. What do you wanna say?" And they'll be like, "I don't know," because they're in, like, a freeze response or a fawn response, and I'll say, "Okay, I'm gonna give you a menu. Do you wanna say stop? Do you wanna say, keep going? I love this?" Like, I'll throw in some humor as a pattern interrupt as well, and usually the thing that they wanna say the most is stop. And so then we practice back and forth role playing, just saying stop and really embodying stop and getting that so my energy is really on board and I really mean it. And I'm coming from that really grounded place of deep knowing that this is not okay and you can't treat me that way. But you might not have that space to practice with a coach or a counselor. So you can practice in the mirror and just say stop and like really just get out what you need, and then also find other creative ways or supportive ways therapeutically to get that out. So one of my clients actually went through some heartbreak, and her and her friend took pumpkins and just smashed them, and like she said that was really therapeutic. So finding creative ways, journaling, drawing, thinking outside of the box of like, if you don't have any friends in your school, maybe I can join a drama club that's free after school somewhere else so I can start making connections and rebuild my self-confidence. Like, just follow things that bring you joy and comfort. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, very cool. Let's talk a little bit about allyship too, because why is it so important, and what's it look like in practice for youth today?
Again, it goes back to just believing somebody. So I remember when I was in high school, I would be crying all the time and depressed, and I would tell my friends what was happening. I would tell even like strangers. I was just trying to find help desperately. But I told my best friend. So she actually at the time, she came on the bus, and every single day in this bus, there'd be like the ringleader of this, and then all his friends. They were all boys. I was like 5 feet, 90 pounds. I was so tiny, and there were all these like massive hockey players screaming all these horrific things every single day for 5 years on this bus. So I told her, and she's like, "I'm gonna come on the bus with you." So she came on, and I was so grateful that, she was gonna come on and, like, see what was happening, and they were totally silent the entire bus ride. And I remember getting off the bus and her turning to me and being like, "I don't know what you're talking about," and my heart just, like, shattering because I was grateful that it didn't happen that day, and also now she doesn't believe me.
Yeah.
So, allyship really starts with believing and then also looking for support. So, like, you as a teenager don't have the skills or might not know how to do this, but going to and helping that person be like, "I'm by your side. We're gonna find help, and until we do, like, I will help message, different mental health platforms and try and get the support that I need or hotlines, whatever I need to do, go to the counselor with you, and don't stop until you get that support." And then just kindness, just kindness. Good old-fashioned kindness goes a long way. We need it more than ever in this world.
Well, yeah, well said. Yeah, I think just having that one person who believes you and can, shows you some compassion, kindness, and wants to be helpful, right? Is huge. Is huge. We're gonna go to a segment we like to call fact or fiction. And so I'm gonna make a statement. You tell me if it's fact or fiction,
Okay.
and why. I think I know the answer to this one. Bullying only happens in schools.
Definitely not. It happens first of all, it usually happens wherever the adults are not supervising, that's one of the things. But camps, clubs, teams, like, where it happens in workplaces, right? So, it happens everywhere. Yeah.
Amazing. The final question we ask all our guests on Jack Amplified. Um, what are your hopes for the future of youth mental health in Canada? Just a small question.
Just a little just just a small my brain's, like, exploding. Um Yeah, I wish this for everybody in the world, really, but, I guess I always have to kinda dial it back and start with, more local. Um, I wish for every young person to have the tools and support, to support their mental health, to support if they're being, going through the abuse of bullying. And then I wish for the adults to be, properly trained, not just a training and then they kinda take away a check mark and whatever, but, like, they can actually role play what they would do with the young person, that's coming to them. That there's more integration with doctors when you have your yearly checkup, that a doctor is actually asking, like, how is school going? Like, are you being bullied? What's happening? Just more eyes and kind of like curiosity around that mental health journey with a child. And then, like I said, really a lot more play and creativity in the education system and focused on social emotional learning, so that children really feel seen and understood and attuned with. So yeah, just more mental health awareness in all aspects of education, parenting, medical, all of it. Just so that we can create this world that I see happen in pockets of like classrooms that run like this or schools that run like this, but on a wider scale of Canada and then the world. So that's the goal.
Beautiful. Well said. And as you talked about, like how you can understand, um, going back to that story with my friend, I mean, I saw the rage and anger in his eyes, and I thought, this is going to be bad. And part of me, if I'm being honest, didn't want to stop him because I remember I was there, right? Like, all right. And then the adult in me kicked in and said no. But yeah, it was scary, and he was able to take a breath. But not everyone's able to do that, right? Because the triggers.
Well,
That
I
part.
I really I'll say this too, because my book is called Be Who You Needed, and I live by that. I always live by how can I be who I needed for any child in my life, like any capacity coaching or whatever, capacity, my nieces, whoever. But I really think like how can I be that for other young people, but also for myself? How can I be the person that I need now and couldn't be at that time? And I always think about I want everybody to be thinking about that as an adult. What is the pain that you experience? So, this pain was so deep in me and it was so many years, but how can I do something positive with it? What can I do with that pain and turn it into something positive? So, yes, I have rage and anger for sure. And like I went through so much, just too much. Nobody should have to go through that. But how can I do something good in this world? And I'm so grateful that I'm here to be able to do that. And I want people to think about how can they turn their pain into something positive, right? To be better for the next generation.
Well, when I think of Jack.org, that's exactly this organization. Someone took pain and turned it into something positive. Absolutely. Rachel, you are a beacon of light. We are so grateful that you took that and turned it into something positive and continue to do that. If someone wanted to get your book, reach out, find out more about you, where would they go?
Yeah, so on Amazon, it's just Be Who You Needed, so you can look that up. But I have my website, I know it's a long name, but rachelweinstock.com. And all my information, the bullying advocacy kit is there. And I'm very active on Instagram and TikTok as well. So almost daily content as well there. So yeah, you can just search me. I'm not the opera singer and I'm not the doctor. There's a couple Rachel Weinstocks, but you'll see my curly hair and you'll know it's me.
That's the tell. Okay, that's the tell. Well, thank you so much for taking your time in your busy schedule to join us. Uh, so much wonderful information that you shared today, little tips and pieces for all of us to learn and grow by. So appreciated.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, another great episode of Jack Amplified with a great guest. I mean, I got so much out of that around like looking for the helpers and just being there for each other, being curious, asking the questions. I mean, there's so much gold to mine from this podcast and our guests today. So please, if you enjoyed the podcast, share, like, subscribe. As we get, the key to doing a lot of this work is just building that ecosystem of supports around the world, across Canada, in our communities. So that's how we do it. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.